All right, so building quadratic models from verbal descriptions and data. So we're going to look at this economy problem. And it says in economics, revenue R in dollars is defined as the amount of money received from the sale of an item and is equal to the unit selling price P in dollars of the number of X items sold, right? So this is your revenue formula. R equals X times P. That's your revenue formula. Okay. The law of demand states that P and X are inversely related. Okay. As one increases, the other will decrease. That's what that means. So P and X are inversely related. As one increases, the other decreases. Okay. This is what we call our demand equation. When the demand equation is linear, the revenue model is a quadratic function. So here's our example using that. An electronics company has found that when a certain calculators are sold at a price of P dollars per unit, the number of X calculators sold is given by the demand equation. X equals 18,750 minus 125P. Find a model that expresses the revenue R as a function of the price. So we know that revenue equals X times P, right? And it tells us what our X is right here. So we're going to substitute that in to find our R. Does that make sense? So we're substituting in, and we get for this particular problem, R equals 18,750 minus 125P times P. So to simplify this, we distribute the P. So after we distribute, we end up with 18,750P minus 125P squared. So that's our revenue. That's our revenue function. Okay, so the domain of this revenue function, because it's a real world problem, is your domain going to be from negative infinity to positive infinity? No, it can't be, right? So we know that our domain has to be greater than 0 to begin with, but then there's going to be a limit on it, right? Because it's not going to go on forever. At some point, it has to come back down. Based on what we have here, so this is part A, sorry. So part B, based on what we have here, our A is negative. So what does that mean about the shape of our parabola? It's not smiling. It's a sad situation, right? It's doing something like this. Does that make sense? So what numbers we're looking for is from 0 to what, right? When does it go boop, 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 and then come back down, right? So that's what we're looking for because those are the only areas where it would be valid data. Anything else would be invalid, such as the negative numbers. So we want to know what is our domain. So what are the values of P? In order to do that, we need to know what our when we equal 0. So we have 18,750P minus 125P squared equal to 0. Okay, so we're going to do math and solve for 0. So first thing I can do here, there's a couple ways we can solve quadratics. We can do the quadratic formula. We could do complete the square. We can factor and solve, which is probably the easiest way here. So if we revert back to what it looked like at the beginning, maybe we could pull out P and go from there. So if we factor out P, go back to where it was with the 18,750 minus 125P, P equals 0, right? Remember, when you do this, you create two smaller problems, right? We already knew that P had to equal 0, correct? Now we got to figure out what is the other value that P is. 18,750 minus 125P equals 0. So I'm going to subtract and divide to find that P value. Does that make sense? I'm going to grab my handy dandy calculadora. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm not dividing that in my head. So, I would have to really concentrate. divided by negative 125. And that gives us 150. So P equals 150. But why do that when we have this guy right here, right? No, I'm playing. All right, so our P ranges from 0 to 150. So our domain is P is less than or equal to 0 and 150. Do we understand why we were looking for the zeros? Based on the shape of where the graph lands, how that would fall. And now we have the domain. Okay, now it's asking what is the maximum revenue that you can earn? What unit price should be used to maximize the revenue? And what is the maximum revenue? If I'm looking for the maximum, what is that called? What am I looking for? The vertex, right? So I'm looking for the vertex of this guy. So if I'm looking for part C and D, I'm looking for the vertex and the maximum value. Meant for the maximum revenue and the maximum cost, price, whatever it was. And so vertex formula, the X equals negative B divided by 2A. So when I look right here, my B is 18,750 and my A is negative 125. Do we see that? So I plug those in. So I have negative 18,750 divided by 2 times negative 125. And that gives me a number. So I come over here and I put it in the calculator if my mouse lets me. So I have parentheses, negative 18750 divided by 2 times negative 125. I put everything I write down in the calculator, make sure I don't miss anything. Hit enter, and I get what? 75. So now I know part C, what unit price should be used to maximize the revenue. And that should be 75 is the unit price. So if I charge $75 for the calculators, and then it wants to know how many units are sold at this price. Okay, so if I'm looking for how many units are sold at this price. Oh, what is the maximum revenue? My bad. So 75, so my maximum revenue is, I'm looking for R of 75. I plug that in. And that's going to give me 18,750 times 75 minus 125 times 75 squared. I'm going to go back over here to my handy dandy calculadora. I have 18,750 times 75 minus 125 times 75 squared. So how much money would they make? They would make $703,125. Imagine making all that from selling calculators. From selling calculators. So that's C and D done. I didn't mean to, I shouldn't have called this X. This is the X of your vertex. You be very specific. Okay, E. E is saying how many units were sold. Remember, X represents the number of calculators, right? So if I want to know how many units were sold, I would have to use my p-value to find X, right? And what was our p-value? Our p-value is 75. So I would plug in 75 to figure out how many units were sold. So we're now looking at X of 75 equals 18,750 minus 125 times 75. We're going to put that in. 18,750 minus 125 times 75. How many calculators did they sell? 9,375 calculators. Hindsight, guys, I probably should have made this more than one slide. Yes. Okay, cool. All right, so in order for us to do G, it says, what price should the company charge for the product to collect at least 590,625 in revenue? So we know that revenue equals 18,750 P minus 125 P squared, right? And we want to be able to collect at least 590,000. So at least, so we want this to be either, what the heck is this thing doing? Greater than or equal to 590,625. So we got to solve this inequality. So when we're solving this inequality, the first thing is we want this side has to be equal to 0. So if I want to make this equal to 0, I'm going to have to subtract 590,625. When I subtract, all it does is become part of the problem because it cannot combine, right? Plus 18,750 P minus 125 P squared is less than or equal to 0. Be greater than or equal to 0. All right. So now we either have to solve using quadratic, solve using different quadratic formula, try factoring. We can try to make the number smaller, maybe by dividing by, if all these numbers are divisible by 125, and see what happens. So if I divide this by 125, I get that. And then 18,750 divided by 125, I get that. Perfect. So we're going to factor out negative 125. And by doing that, we're left with P squared minus 150P plus 4,725 is greater than or equal to 0. So at this point, we either can do a simple factor if we know, I don't know the factors of 4,725 by heart. I don't know if you guys do. But if we knew those factors, we could do that, or we could just do the quadratic formula. I say do the quadratic, but if you know your factors of 4,725, then you could do a simple factor, but I don't. I'm not gonna pretend that I do either, okay? So we have P equals negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC divided by 2A. Quadratic formula at its finest. So I'm going to do the discriminant first. And that's 150, or I thought, 150 squared minus 4 times 1 times 4,725. And I get 3,600. And the square root of 3,600 is, do I even really need to type it in? No, but just for the sake of it, it is 60. Oh my gosh. So we're left with 150. So P equals 150 plus or minus 60 divided by 2. So So what are the prices that they would need to set? So we have 150 plus 60 divided by 2. Then we have 150 minus 60 divided by 2. So 210 divided by 2 is 105. So $105. And then 150 minus 60 is 90. And 90 divided by 2 is 45. So they could sell less calculators if they charge 105. Sell a lot of calculators if they charge 45, but either one of these will help them reach their goal of 590,625. Okay. It's the quadratic formula, just with larger numbers, right? That's the only difference than what you've learned before, is that you're manipulating and working with larger numbers. Same formula, same stuff, just bigger numbers. Okay. All right, questions. So this was one problem that went through all of it, all of the different things you need to be able to do with quadratics. I have others if we want to go through some more, but are we comfortable? Were we comfortable going through all those? Okay, so it's okay if I'm done with 2-4, 4-2, 4-4. I can talk. All right, this one is the measurement. So now we're going to talk about finding your regression model. So finding the regression model involves you using your calculator. So in the calculator, I'm going to clear it just to make sure everything's clear. 7, 1, 2. Then I go to stat and I'm going to input my information. So make sure you have your calculator for Tuesday for your calculator part of the test, right? So we have 21 and 4, 29 and 6, 39 and 5, 49 and a half, 59.4, 68 and 9/10, and 74 and 3/10. So those are my ages. And then my dollars, my E value is 34 and 4/10, 52 and 8/10, 66 and 4/10, 71 and 2/10, 61 and 3/10, 50 and 9/10, and 45 and 8/10. Okay. You hit stat. You hit stat, then edit. Stat next to the arrow below the delete. And then you input the value. Okay. Wow, did you ever find a calculator? What happened? No luck? Well, make sure you have one for
I use my phone
for Tuesday. You just got to put it in airplane mode.
Okay.
Airplane mode, do not disturb it. Basically, just has to be a calculator. Okay. Do nothing else.
Use my phone to calculate.
Yep. Are you ready? Have we all inputted?
This thing's
Where's your expense calculator? You got this 50 calculator and it's carrying
You don't
case,
even use
and you
that.
don't even use it. You're the most expensive calculator in the room. Oh, okay. Just know that when it comes to Tuesday, you ask him how to put this here. Like, no, I can't help you.
Start, edit.
Oh.
then put value.
And okay.
Okay,
No,
so
she was
I'm
telling me the
writing
steps.
this down.
Are you ready for the next step? So you have to close this window in order to do the next step. So to close the window, you hit second mode and it should take you back to a blank page. So to close the window, you hit second mode. Yeah, are we there? Okay. Notice that all of our values are rounded to the tens place. So we're going to press mode and we're going to make sure that we round to the nearest tens, which is 1 decimal. Still with me? All right, so then hit enter. I'm going to hit second mode again and it should take me to the blank page. Okay, now we're gonna go back to stat, but this time we're gonna go to calc because we want to calculate. And we're looking for a quadratic function, right? So do you see where it says quad regression? So we're gonna go to quad regression. Good. And then you're gonna hit enter. And you're gonna hit enter again. And it's gonna give you the values of your quadratic function. So it gives you your A, your B, and your C. You don't have numbers. You have no numbers. Okay. So you go to stat. I input everything in, and I'm gonna go to calc. And you see where it says quad regression. And I'll think about it, and I'll give you your values. So I'll give you your A, your B.
How do I do that thing?
Okay, now, the reason why I'm giving you this one is so when you look at this, do you guys see how our A says -0.0? That means that our mode is too small, our rounded value is too small, so it doesn't let us see enough decimal places. When that happens, you want to change your mode value. So like maybe I may need to see 3 decimal places, or I may need to see 4 decimal places, but you're gonna change it. And you're just gonna repeat it again and see if you can see that value. And now I see the full A value. So don't freak out like, oh, my A was a -0. No, your A is not a -0. Your A just needs to be expanded on so you can see additional value. Okay. All right, so we now have our A, our B, and our C. Can we write an equation? Why, yes, we can, Miss Jones. I knew that. Good job. So our equation for this problem would be E equals, and we have -0.04. And paying attention to what it asks you to round to, I'm just going to be a little exact here. And it's x squared plus 4 and 23, 21. I don't know where I got the 23 from. You never saw that? Minus 34 and 96 hundredths. I'll write that a little better. So we have 21x minus 34 and 96 hundredths. Okay, so I simply just plugged in my A, my B, and my C. How do we feel? Okay. Is it doable? All right, questions. All right, that's the regression.